President Trump is imposing new tariffs on 8 European NATO allies in retaliation for their opposition to his push to acquire Greenland. The tariffs will start at 10% on February 1st and rise to 25% on June 1st. And they're going to stay in place until a deal is reached on a U.S. purchase of Greenland, Trump wrote in a Truth Social post over the weekend. The targeted countries responded with a joint statement condemning the move, saying it undermines transatlantic relations and risks a dangerous downward spiral. In a call with Trump yesterday, UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer told him that applying tariffs on allies for pursuing the collective security of NATO allies is wrong, and that European leaders emphasized NATO cooperation and sovereignty. Meanwhile, as President Trump battles those European allies over Greenland, another ally the administration has been at odds with is now making deals with China. Canada has reached a trade deal with China to cut tariffs on electric vehicles and other goods as the two nations seek to lower their trade dependence on the United States. So under this initial agreement, Canada will now allow up to 49,000 Chinese electric vehicles at a 6.1% tariff rate, reversing Justin Trudeau's 100% rate from 2024. In exchange, China will lower tariffs on Canadian canola seed by March 1st and also lift retaliatory tariffs on canola meal, peas, and certain shellfish. The move follows last week's meeting in Beijing between Chinese President Xi Jinping and Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney, who, mind you, the first Canadian Prime Minister to visit China since all the way back in 2017. Carney said the agreement will unlock $3 billion in export orders for Canada and added his nation must learn from innovative partners. President Trump praised Carney for striking the deal with China, despite criticism from several of Trump's own cabinet members. Let's bring in MS Now international affairs analyst and former U.S. ambassador to Russia, Michael McFaul. His recent book is titled Autocrats versus Democrats: China, Russia, America, and the New Global Disorder. And Mr. Ambassador, always good to see you. What we're seeing here, Canada running into the arms of China, shows just how it views how unreliable the United States now is. And certainly no better of example of that than what we're seeing over Greenland. These European nations felt the need to respond to President Trump's tariffs. They have issued stern warning after stern warning saying, don't go after Greenland. And they've made clear the consequence, that if the United States were to take Greenland one way or the other, it would shatter the NATO alliance.
Jonathan, this is so tragic. This is so stupid. This is the worst foreign policy idea ever in the history of the United States of America. There is no national security interest that requires us to annex Greenland. If we need more soldiers there, we can put more soldiers there. We have the Fifth Fleet in Bahrain for deterrence in the Middle East. We didn't need to annex Bahrain to have our fleet there. Out in China, in Asia area, in the Asia Pacific, our Seventh Fleet is in Japan. We didn't need to annex territory to have our Seventh Fleet, our most important military asset in all of Asia, there. And we don't need to annex Greenland to enhance deterrence here. And the consequences, you've alluded to them, but I want to pull on that string that you just tied very smartly together. Some people think, well, this is our land, this is our territory, we want to have this, and the president really wants this. But there are consequences to it. First and foremost, the NATO alliance, as you rightly pointed out, will blow up. We'll never recover from this, and we will be weaker in deterring Putin, who the president keeps trying to tell us is the reason we're taking Greenland. But the bigger consequences are all over the world. If we just continue to bully countries like this and try to get our way because we can, you can do that in the short run. You can do that against a country like Greenland. There's no doubt that we have the military capacity to seize Greenland if the president makes that order. But countries don't like it. Leaders don't like it. And eventually they're going to pivot away from us. And you just saw the first evidence with that, talking about that tremendous trade deal, shocking trade deal to me, that Canada and China just did. Why did they do that? Because the president talked about making Canada the 51st state. And that will happen all over the world if we continue to pursue these vanity projects for President Trump.
Ambassador McFaul, it's Walter Isaacson here, and you were just saying how Trump used the threat of Russia in Greenland to justify why we need to take it over. But it seems to me nothing could help Russia or Putin more than this policy, and it's strengthening exactly what Russia and Putin want right now.
Couldn't agree more, Walter. We're looking for a rationality where a rational argument does not exist. So let's talk about this. If you're really worried about Putin, give the Ukrainians more arms to stop Putin where he's invaded a country. President's not doing that. If you're really worried about Putin, why are you inviting him to your peace club or whatever it's called that's just been reported in the last few hours? Trump never talks about Putin as a threat. He talks about him as his friend. He rolled out the red carpet for him in Alaska. And yet on another day, he needs some kind of rationale to explain this vanity project. And I want to emphasize this. This is the president pursuing a vanity project. He wants Greenland to become Trumpland so that he can say that he was the one that expanded the United States of America. Reminds me of this idiotic ballroom that nobody asked for. There was no groundswell of support for it. That's what this is. This has nothing to do with deterring the Russians and Vladimir Putin.
Ambassador, it's Lauren Leader. It's remarkable to me that we're having this depth of conversation when just a few weeks ago, the United States also abducted the leader of Venezuela. And apparently we're now running that country as well, although that seems to have fallen off of the headlines in the last few days, given the inflammatory nature of these Greenland conversations. So how do you parse those two? We still haven't, I think most Americans still don't understand what's happening in Venezuela. And now we've shifted this attention on the international stage to this, as you've said, sort of pointless squabble over Greenland. How do you reconcile the two? And what should people understand about maybe what they have to do with one another or not?
So the Trump administration's explanation is this is an extension of the Monroe Doctrine, right? The Trump annex to that. And they say, well, we need to dominate our sphere of influence. But I want to point out two things that are just radically wrong with that logic. First, if you go back, and I'm afraid saying this with Walter on the show, but the Monroe Doctrine was an anti-imperial doctrine. It was to say the imperial powers cannot seize land and have colonies in the Western Hemisphere. What Trump is doing is a pro-imperial doctrine. I thought we got rid of imperialism after 1945, when the whole world agreed that this was a really bad idea, and we had this extraordinary period of decolonization. He wants to go back to that. But the second thing, this is all about seizing territory for minerals and oil, right? That's one of the arguments they make about Greenland. We need their minerals. The argument in Venezuela is all about oil. And it's just tragic to me. Maduro was a horrible guy, illegitimate leader. He did not win the election in 2024. The rational thing to do, the pragmatic thing to do, even for ExxonMobil and Chevron, would be to help pact a peaceful transition to democracy in Venezuela, to create the permissive conditions for the investment. But Trump isn't doing that. He's literally just dealing with the Maduro regime minus one person, Nicolas Maduro.
And former U.S. Ambassador to Russia, Michael McFaul, he mentioned, Mr. Ambassador, you mentioned Vladimir Putin getting an invitation to Trump's board of peace. I'll just take a second and underscore. This is Vladimir Putin, who is currently waging war in Ukraine, a completely illegal invasion there, still pummeling those cities with missiles and drones, killing innocent civilians. And President Trump offers him a spot on the board of peace for $1 billion. The Kremlin says it's considering the invitation. Mr. Ambassador, thank you again. And Walter Isaacson, before we let you go, it is a dizzying moment here, a dizzying moment in terms of headlines, both at home and abroad, Minneapolis and Greenland. Tell us what you're thinking about right now? Perhaps what worries you the most?
You know, one of the things that has struck me is the weird echoes, if you go back in history, to Louis XIV of France, the so-called Sun King, you know, with his gilded palaces over-gilding the rooms, Hall of Mirrors in Versailles, where he's worshiping himself. But you look at the economic policies of his finance minister, Colbert, it was always having more tariffs and state-run enterprises. And then when it came to foreign policy, whether it's the War of Spanish Succession or taking on, for that matter, the Dutch, it was all very personally driven for the self-aggrandizement of King Louis XIV. And it's so many weird echoes today of that.
Professor of History at Tulane University, historian Walter Isaacson, we appreciate your perspective as always. Thank you for joining us this morning.